Welcome to The Author Show, where we feature new authors and books, from fiction to self-help and everything in between. You'll find it all at theauthorshow.com. That's theauthorshow.com. And now let the show begin.
Hi, this is The Author Show, and I'm your host, Linda Thompson. In 1967, an eager 30-year-old psychotherapist, Gibbs Williams, was offered a job treating heroin addicts at Odyssey House in Manhattan. Gibbs has written Smack in the Middle, My Turbulent Time Treating Heroin Addicts at Odyssey House, which details his time there. He's here to share his story with us, and I want to welcome Gibbs. Welcome to The Author Show.
Thank you very much, Linda. I appreciate the opportunity.
Gibbs, will you please give us a quick overview of Smack in the Middle?
Well, I guess the best way to describe it is what you've already done. I think the title pretty much speaks for itself. Smack in the Middle, My Turbulent Time Treating Heroin Addicts at Odyssey House. Let me add a little bit more. Who experiences the best and worst of his present and past life, learning a lot about himself, drug addiction, and abuse of authority.
After all this time, why did you decide to share your story in a book?
Well, the truth of it is, when I went to Odyssey and got the job in 1967, it really truly was a dream job. For the 17 months I worked there, it was a dream job for the first 5 months. Then as contradictions set in, it wasn't quite as perfect as I thought. It was not my perfect Garden of Eden. Contradictions mainly by the executive director, who was both a psychiatrist and lawyer, 36 years old, quite a genius in a lot of ways, but turned out to be a sort of mad genius. And as contradictions started to flood my experience, I appointed myself the scribe of Odyssey House and kept a detailed journal. I left after 17 months, which was hard to do, but I finally left. And I did nothing about writing a memoir until 10 years later, when I came outside my home on a Sunday and read about the horrific experience that Jonestown had with something like, 900 people suiciding or whatever it was. And I was numb. And I figured, that's crazy. How can I not have any feelings? The next day I woke up in a panic, realizing I know exactly what happened at Jonestown. I think I lived it. It was the same thing. I then quickly started to write a memoir, and I probably had the basis of it from my journal in about 6 weeks. And then I started to take it increasingly more seriously. Somebody said, get an editor. I did, and then I went to publish it. I kept getting glowing responses, but nothing really connected. And that carried on for years and years and years. And then I decided, you know something, I really think I have something valuable. I need to get a professional editor, which I did.
Gibbs, you list Joel Sandberg as your co-author or perhaps your editor. Who is Joel?
Joel is a professional editor, and he also writes books. And I found him online needing a press release for another book. I wrote to him. He did it. We became instant good friends, and we've been collaborating for about 2 years. And I find it just a dream to work with somebody who understands me, and I think I understand him. It's been a great experience.
Were you picturing any particular type of reader while you were writing Smack in the Middle?
I've had a lot of thinking relative to who this might appeal to. And I think the closest I get to it are roughly very smart adolescents from about 15 to 30. Adolescence goes way into the 20s these days, who are confused relative to seeking their own personal and professional identities. And I think my book is a true understanding of the vicissitudes of trying to do that and do it really well.
How would you describe your writing style?
That's a not easy to answer question, but let me try the following way. I think it's a question of speaking from my heart and my head and seeking a collaborator like Joel, and together seeing if we can make whatever I have to say as readable as we are both able to do.
I'd like to know if Smack in the Middle is similar to anything else we may have read.
I honestly think this is unique for the reason that it's extremely personal and it's really different. I don't think I've ever read anything that even comes close to the particular treatment I have of this.
Gibbs, what do you remember about walking into Odyssey House for the very first time?
It was a fortuitous meeting. I had decided that I needed a PhD, and I had applied to 10 graduate schools and quit my job as a personnel finder for New York State Employment Service after 7 years, and decided to go back to a hotel resort where I was a photographer over the summer, with the idea that certainly one of those schools was going to invite me to get a doctorate. Well, I got 10 out of 10 rejections, primarily because I did extremely well in the verbal and extremely poor in the math, and I was disheartened. However, I did have a master's degree in psychology. I happened to meet a guest who worked at Odyssey House. She liked me, and she said, I think our executive director is probably going to call you to get a job. I was thrilled to death. The first day I went there, it was like a dream come true.
I understand that you are a licensed practicing psychoanalyst. What do you think was the most important thing you learned during your time at Odyssey House?
Good question. I think for me, I learned, that I and my addict population were no different. Anybody can become addicted, certainly to heroin. The only difference between me and them was I used to go home at night. They were a captive audience. That's one of the things. The other thing I found was, I think that the reason why the so-called war on addiction has failed is because people who are involved with this are too used to describing symptoms and too little focus on trying to get to core problems.
That's a very interesting analogy. So do you believe that treatment of drug addiction has changed from the time you were at Odyssey House up until present time?
I hate to say the following because I'm probably going to get a lot of mail, which is going to curse me out. But I think the truth of it is the people I worked with who I liked and were really dedicated 50 years ago were more enlightened with respect to working in a therapeutic community treating heroin addicts than there are today. I think we're going backwards, and it's a shame.
Interesting. Odyssey House was a residential treatment center. Were the treatment methods different from what you had learned in school?
Oh, the experience of a therapeutic community was absolutely radical. If I were the drug czar, I would have therapeutic communities all over the world, which would have populations of about 100 people, a well-educated, dedicated staff, run the structured community that would almost guarantee that after a year or a year and a half, most even hardcore addicts are going to come out not only drug-free, but having started to really build a psychological structure called the self.
Wow. Gibbs, do you continue to work with addicts now?
Yes, in my private practice, I have a lot of people addicted to drugs and other kinds of addictions, food addictions and so forth.
Are you writing another book now?
Yes, actually, one of the results of Odyssey House was that I left as confused and as clear as that I'd ever been in my life, and the confusion part catapulted me into an 11-year psychoanalysis where I met my great analyst 3 times a week on the couch, no insurance, so I was obviously very dedicated. I kept a annotated journal and decided that after working on it, I really think I have a really good contribution to make as to what really happens in an effective psychotherapy. So my book is called Oedipus from Miami Beach, a 26-year journal in which I'm searching for my spiritual father.
What would you like readers to remember about Odyssey House and your time there?
That's a great question. When I look back to the experience that I had, even the bad part, it stands out in sharp relief. There will never be probably exactly the same kind of institution we had, which was both, as I say, the best and the worst. It was sort of like a Dickens tale. It was, in a lot of ways, a dream come true, which was also partially nightmarish. But I got my baptism of fire, and I think I really have a blueprint for defining the very best and the very worst of treatment of heroin addicts.
Gibbs, will you please read a short excerpt from Smack in the Middle for our listeners?
I would love to. A little bit of context. In my second week at Odyssey, I was supposed to give a solo induction meeting, and induction was inviting any raw addict off the street to a 3-hour meeting with the idea of telling them what Odyssey was and trying to motivate them to come into the program. So this is my first induction meeting at Odyssey House. The first potential inductee on which I focused was a resident named Tyrone. He was a tall, 20-year-old, near skeleton of a man. I sensed an instant connection with him despite our significant disparities. I was short, he was tall. I grew up in the comfortable middle class. He was raised in a squalid lower-class tenement. I had been immersed in lifelong learning. He lacked any formal education, although he seemed to me to be very intelligent. I was white, he was black. Tyrone, I asked, what motivated you to come here today? I asked him after I'd finished my opening statement. He sat silently and stared at the blank wall. I chose to wait him out. His determination to remain mute was as strong as mine was to hang on. For a while it seemed to be a standoff. I couldn't let that happen. I knew that if I failed to get him to talk, my first solo induction meeting would be deemed a failure. Winging it, I said, you chose to come here, so there must be a reason why you did. What is it? His head nodded ever so slightly, merely to acknowledge that he had heard the question. But that's as far as the acknowledgement went. Still no words came out of his mouth. Are you always so talkative? I asked. Everyone laughed. Tyrone smiled. Hope returned. I'm serious, Tyrone. There must be a reason why you came here today. Our game of cat and mouse went on for quite a while. What's stopping you from coming into the program? He looked at me. I just can't imagine giving up a 10-year habit that I depend on just by walking into this crappy building. I see, but you must feel that something about your habit isn't working for you, and you're not getting what you want, I asserted to him. Otherwise, you wouldn't have made the effort to come into this crappy building in the first place, and you definitely would have left at least half hour ago. You wouldn't still be here talking with me. I'm sure you have better things to do. Tyrone cracked a smile. Hope soared again. Can you answer one simple question? I asked. What is so good about dope? I like dope, he said. It makes me feel good. It takes away the pain. Whether he knew it or not, Tyrone had just identified the underlying principle that drives most heroin addicts to become addicts. In those 3 short sentences, he described the essence of what motivated not just him, but the vast majority of drug addicts who need to maintain a habit that almost without fail leads them to grim personal dilemmas up to and including death. Tyrone, I said, if you come into our program, we'll teach you how to get high on life. Once again, laughter erupted.
Wow. What an interesting excerpt, and I'd love to hear the rest of that story. But I want to know where we can learn more about you, about your other books, and where can we purchase Smack in the Middle? I
have a author website that I am extremely pleased with that is called Gibbs Williams. Let me spell it out. GIBBS WILLIAMS smack.com.
And there's an author's bio, and we can find out more about all your other books.
All that stuff, testimonials, all the books I've done, actually some of my piano playing I've thrown in, my artwork, and a lot of other stuff.
We've been talking with Gibbs Williams, author of Smack in the Middle, My Turbulent Time Treating Heroin Addicts at Odyssey House. Gibbs, you've written a very interesting account of your experience at Odyssey House. Thank you for sharing your story with us. It's been a pleasure to talk with you, and I do hope you'll come back again when you publish your next book.
Thank you, Linda. I very much appreciate it. Great interview. Bless you.
In Smack in the Middle, Williams documents his personal and professional journey at Odyssey House that is both a fascinating look back and an important mirror on some of the most vexing problems that our society faces today. He has a very interesting story to tell, and if you're as fascinated with it as I am, please visit gibbswilliams-smack.com and order your copy today. And please share this interview with your friends so that they too may become acquainted with our author. And remember that the Author Show may be accessed at any time at theauthorshow.com. Plus, selected interviews can also be found on major podcasting platforms such as Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, and many more. Whether you're an author who would like to be featured or a reader in search of new books, theauthorshow.com is a really great place to start.
Thanks for listening to The Author Show. Find out more about authors and their work at theauthorshow.com. Theauthorshow.com. Tune in next time to another great author on The Author Show.